We are live.
All right. Yeah, that's right. We got to set up a new intro.
Yeah.
So, Ken, thanks for coming on to our show here. We appreciate it. Hopefully,
It's an
we'll have
honor
a
to
lot
be
of fun.
here. Thank you for having me.
So, I know you're fairly well known. Um, that's a good thing. But I'm certain there are some people that don't know you as well as they'd like to. Do you want to tell us anything about yourself? Like, kind of. I might as well just ask you the same thing I ask everybody else. What kind of got you started?
Well, certainly I've been asked that question many times. People are very curious about that, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So what I tell people is it's just been a lifelong passion of mine. As far as cryptozoology, the search for unknown animals, mysterious creatures, and that passion started when I was about 8 or 9 years old. My father was a scientist, a forestry professor,
That's
and
cool.
my mother was very adventurous and loved to tell me about Yeti and the Mothman and things when I was a kid. But uh, probably right prior to that, I saw a TV show about Bigfoot when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I at that up to that point, two of my passions at a young age were animals. I had a lot of exotic pets growing up, like little caiman alligators, and I used to go out in the woods and collect a lot of things. And so I loved animals, and I also loved monster movies. I was raised on Godzilla and Creature from the Black Lagoon and all that
Yep.
stuff. So when I first saw the show about Bigfoot, it seemed to embody all of that stuff. It was a monster in some ways, but it was also possibly some unknown animal or species running around in the woods of North America. So around that same time period, there were a lot of TV shows that were very, very influential. In Search of with Leonard Nimoy and
Oh, heck yeah. I love
old
Search Up.
70s documentaries, Monsters and Mysteries, and $6 Million Man, and so Legend of Boggy Creek. So all that stuff kind of growing up. And I traveled a lot when I was a kid. My mother was a travel agent, took me all over the world. So I got to visit the Amazon jungle and, Africa, Asia, Australia, all these places. And even as a kid, I was trying to research legendary creatures wherever I was. And then when I was 15 years old, I attempted my first field research at Loch Ness. My mom arranged for me and my dad to travel to Loch Ness. He was a big fisherman, and I was there, of course, looking for evidence of Nessie. So this has been something I've done my
That's
whole
pretty
life.
cool.
I never thought of it as a career. It was just something that I was passionate about and borderline obsessed with. And over the last 20 years or so, I've become very blessed, and I started writing books and appearing at different events and conferences and appearing on TV shows. And so it's been really an amazing time ever since.
That is really cool. I like that. I like that a lot. So, over the many years that you've been doing this, what is your most favorite cryptid to actually study or try to find evidence of?
That's definitely got to be a top three question. Also, it's hard to choose. I love them all. I'm a generalist in the field of cryptozoology, so certainly I investigate the rock star, i.e., Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the Yeti, the big hairy guy, and then lake monsters, uh, Black Panthers, mystery cats. But probably what I tell people is that my favorite should be, like winged cryptids like thunderbirds and maybe Mothman, because that's kind of what I became known for and am known for in the field of cryptozoology. I started researching accounts of giant unknown birds, about 20 years ago. And then that was what kind of spawned my first book, Big Bird: Modern Sightings of Flying Monsters. And so I've never seen one, never seen any physical evidence, but I've interviewed dozens and dozens of people that swear they've seen giant unknown flying creatures all around North America and the world. So maybe that's my favorite. But I love them all. I like the variety of different cryptids in the field.
You've got a lot of guts. I gotta say that you got a lot of guts. I saw the Alaska video where you're out there in that cold weather searching for the thunderbird out there. Yeah,
Oh
that.
yeah, that was a dream come true because
Oh
actually,
man,
we
it's thinking cold.
yeah,
You know, I
yeah,
don't
it
like
was.
winter. And here I live in Wisconsin, but yeah, that was a really interesting video. That one caught me. That Alaska trip of yours that I was watching.
Thanks.
But
Well, that was a dream
you're
come true, really. So I've gotten a lot of reports of thunderbirds from Alaska in recent years. So I'd always wanted to go up there and do an investigation there. Really, you could make an argument that Alaska has more potential to harbor a large unknown animal like a thunderbird or a Bigfoot or anything than any other place
mhm.
in North America. Once you're there and you realize, how vast and unexplored it is, and it's just great
Yep.
habitat, incredible biodiversity and resources. So, and it's cold, as you said, which things tend to get larger. Certain animals tend to be larger in cold environments.
Yeah,
So it's called Bergman's rule. So
Yep. And the larger they are, the better heat source they become. It's easier for them to stay warm.
that's it. But I will
But no,
say, I live in Texas, and my very first or second night filming in Alaska, they had us out in February, and it was about 15 below. And
wow,
actually, with the wind chill, it was measuring 30 below. And
wow.
so, they were wanting us to film at night, and it was pretty, even for a Texas boy. And I had good, layer. I had lots of base layers, and I had a $900 parka, Canada Goose, McMurdo State, whatever. And I'm still like really cold. So yeah, Alaska can get cold, no doubt about it.
yeah. I lost my
Well,
tolerance for the winter. I had a good tolerance. I could build it up. I could be out there until my lips were blue because I grew up in Wisconsin. We're used to the below zero weather here,
Yeah.
but nope, not anymore, man. I hibernate in the winter time. So my dog loves it.
tell you, Ken. In situations like that, you should have actually talked to somebody up here and asked them what kind of equipment we use to go out hunting. That's the kind of stuff you'd need for your trip to Alaska.
Yeah, yeah, we learned quickly what you needed to survive up there. So
Oh yeah. Um, so what is your? Do you have any theories? You mentioned the Thunderbird. Do you have any theories behind the Thunderbird itself? What it could possibly be?
well, the Thunderbirds are, and for your listeners that aren't familiar, I'm sure most of your listeners have heard the name Thunderbird. They probably associate it with either a classic 70s sports car or perhaps a fine wine that they buy at the convenience store. But the name Thunderbird obviously applies to many different Native American traditions that talk about gigantic birds. I'm seeing the big feathers right behind Joe right now. So I'm saying this, which is pretty cool. Joe's going to be
That's
our
our
Thunder.
logo.
Joe will be our
That's
Thunderbird
actually our
stand.
logo.
Lots of different Native American tribes have legends. The Wakanyan, Pinisi, Pomala, Huhuk, Chegwe, Tlanoa. These are
Mhm.
all like different Native American names. Tribes all over North America, same thing. And then there are the modern sightings. But what we don't have in terms of thunderbirds, we have a lot of sightings. Lots of people I've interviewed that swear they've seen them. We're talking about wingspans like 15 to 20 feet across. Massive, twice as big as anything, like in the biggest eagle or whatever. Um, but there's no physical evidence. No one's produced a giant feather, egg, nest, bird crap that covers an entire car. Nothing that we could use as empirical evidence. So it's all basically anecdotal, which is a big problem. You would expect if these things were out there at some point, they would leave something physical
Yeah, but
behind. So
sometimes you might see that stuff at the wrong time. I saw something. I to this day I don't know what it was, but it had a very huge wingspan, and it was sitting on one of those street signs over the highway.
Mhm.
I know what it wasn't, but you're going down the highway so fast you can't get a camera up in time to try to snap a picture, even though everybody carries around a camera on their cell phone nowadays. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's
No.
why I think that's why a lot of times you're just not prepared enough when you see some of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, if they do exist, to kind of wrap up your question, Mark, if they do exist, the most likely candidate are a Pleistocene order of birds called teratorns, which were around up until about 10,000 years ago in North America. And they were vulturine birds. They had a hooked beak. They were like accipterids, raptors. And their wingspans were from about 12 to 18 feet across. So
Right.
they pretty much fit the description of what people are describing. So that would be the most likely candidate based on the data that we have so far. But who knows?
Okay. So have you? I know you've done a lot of extensive research and everything. Have you ever seen that photograph of the guys from the 1800s? That's with that pterodactyl.
I've never seen, nor has anyone I know seen the actual photo, but many of us have seen hoaxed versions of that photo that have been reproduced and are circulated on the internet. So there is a story of a giant winged thing, more not a giant bird so much as like a pterodactyl looking thing that was shot in the Whetstone Mountains of Arizona, allegedly in 1896 by a couple of farmer ranchers, cowboys, and supposedly they spread it out and up against a barn, and there were probably about, I think, 6 to 12 guys that were stretching out the wings. This is the story as it appeared in the Tombstone Epitaph newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Although the newspaper article doesn't actually mention the photograph was mentioned later on by a guy named Frank Pearl, who was writing in these Old West magazines in the early, the mid 1900s. And so a lot of people have claimed to have seen this photo, including John Keel, author of the Mothman Prophecies, but I've never seen the original. It's been lost to time. And there are a lot of people that have tried to reproduce that in different ways with Civil War soldiers or lumberjacks or whatever. And of course, those have all been verified as being reconstructions and not the actual photo. I've never seen, again, nor has anyone I know seen that so-called
That
original
proves my
version.
theory. See,
But
he just proved my point because I've seen a lot of those photos, the ones you're talking about with like the Civil War soldiers or whatever, and right away I'm saying that's like Photoshop. You
here,
know,
Yeah, good. We all have to,
I mean
that's
that right
what
there.
we have to do is we have to question all those photographs. Any photographic evidence has to be questioned these
Right.
days with
No, yeah, I
well,
agree. I agree with you, especially with the way
anything I see
computers
on the
are today.
internet, I'm skeptical of.
But this particular one right here, I think, is the one you're talking about that
Oh
may
yeah,
have been reproduced.
that's more like of a traditional reproduction. But the original description by Pearl, I think he said that the guys were like wearing kind of like bowler hats and trench coats. These guys look more like kind of old, dusty ranchers. I don't know. It's probably the closest version to what was described, but that's still a reconstruction as far as I know.
Okay. And now, by bringing that up and asking about that, would you hypothesize that the possibility may be there in some of this this country and areas that have been not really like trekked through and this and checked out, and the stuff that's like untamed wilderness, untouched.
Oh yeah, obviously that's why I pursue these things. And to give you a condensed version of my basic cryptozoology 101 lecture, it basically boils down to these things. The world is still pretty vast and unexplored.
Mm-hmm.
71% of the planet is covered by water that averages 12,000 feet deep. The
Yep.
other 29% of the planet is half wilderness area, vast swamps, deserts, tundra, jungles, forests, mountain ranges. Alaska, we were just talking about that. There's like 4 million
Mm-hmm.
lakes in Alaska. 37 mountain ranges. I mean, it's that's just one section, but I mean, there's places like that all around the world. So the potential is there. On top of that, zoology is continually describing thousands of new species every year. The vast majority of those are small, but
Right.
every few years they find something, a tapir, an orangutan, a bovid, a large cat, something that has been undocumented and not scientifically described. So that the potential is there for large undiscovered animals, and that's kind
Right.
of
Yeah.
my
No,
that's
I
my
agree.
philosophy in cryptozoology. I'm fascinated with the quote unquote paranormal and the supernatural. That all fascinates me, and I have a lot of good friends that pursue that. But I don't connect that necessarily to what I'm interested in and what I pursue, which is evidence of giant unknown animals that would be pretty spectacular when they're found because they're huge and they have monstrous qualities.
Well, that
Right.
that goes that now just in that alone, right there, that goes to prove, anything's possible. But my theory is, and I've heard you talk about this when you've talked about the black cats, you
Mhm.
know, aka panthers, the things that people call panthers are usually jaguars or leopards with that melatonin disease or whatever it's called condition. Why can't that happen in a cougar or a mountain lion?
Well, it could theoretically. It's just never been documented. There's never been melanism, as you point out, is a mutation.
Right.
It affects about 6 to 11% of jaguars and leopards, but it's never been documented. Melanism, which is a buildup of black pigment, dark pigment under the skin that creates black
Mm-hmm.
fur, has never been documented in a mountain lion. That doesn't mean it couldn't exist, that mutation, but since it's never been seen, it's just one of those things we have to speculate about. But it certainly
Well,
could be a logical explanation for these so-called Black Panther sightings. And I guarantee you, because we talk about Bigfoot, we talk about Nessie, Chupacabra, Mothman, all these cool cryptids. Whenever I bring up these Black Panthers, I get several people that contact me that say, "I've seen one of those. I didn't know, they didn't know it was like an unknown, oh wow, look at that Black Panther running across the road." And it's like, hey, hello, that shouldn't exist in North America. Maybe if you were driving down the road in Asia or something, but here there should be no giant black cats. But a lot of people claim they've seen them, and there's thousands of eyewitness descriptions of these things. So
well,
they
Yeah.
could be black mountain lions. That is one explanation.
I also think that anything's possible. Some of the ones that sightings around here, well, one escaped from Brookfield Zoo in Milwaukee, I think it was,
Mm-hmm.
the one time, and it was caught crossing the street, you know. Um, but then the one I'm most interested is the one that they see over in what would that be, the western side of the state, over by Hillsboro. Um, there's the park that
Big Cat Mountain.
yeah, the Big Cat Mountain Park. I have yet to go there, but that I believe a lot of those people that said that they've seen this cat out there,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe that it's probably a cougar mountain lion that's just all black.
Yeah, it could be. That's one
Well,
possible explanation.
well, if you really look at it in the aspect of
The
how
DNR says
science
it doesn't exist.
is, you get tigers that have albinoism. You have lions that have albinoism, and those have been documented. Who's to say that doesn't happen in the reverse? You've got that mutation happening. I mean, is science really going to be that closed-minded to say that it may not absolutely happen in reverse, and you'll have that mutation instead of an albino cat?
Well, the DNR said
Yeah, that's a fair point. There may be albino mountain lions, Puma concolor. I'd have to do the
Mm-hmm.
research on that. There are black bobcats. They found melanistic bobcats in Florida. So,
There you go. I mean,
so you're
that
right.
that right there
Those
can
genes are out
actually
there. So
keep
it's
pointing towards, you know, something like that can actually keep pointing towards the fact that the truth that it could absolutely be, pigmentation of a mountain lions.
Yeah.
So
It's a good point. I just I would think, I can't really speak for the scientific establishment per se, but I would imagine that, science is typically based on, well, this is the data or the evidence that we've collected thus far.
right.
And technically they should keep an open mind and say it is possible that this could happen, and not just completely
Exactly.
close off their mind and say, nope, can't happen. So they're always true science always leaves a margin of error, even if it's just like 10%. We could be wrong about this. It could. So you're right.
Well,
I
if it happens in one feline, why can't it happen in another feline species?
Well, it has
Well,
to do with adaptations that go. For example, it's been speculated that the melanistic jaguars and leopards of African Asia, that particular mutation is often associated with populations that live in denser forests. In other words, the melanism is an adaptation that is beneficial in a heavily forested or jungle area,
Right.
which is why that particular variation or morph may have sprung up.
They retain
So,
heat.
and if you look at and track the populations of known melanistic or observations of melanistic big cats like that, they're typically in like dense jungle areas, like in the equator and stuff. Not all of them, but that's kind of the concentration. So if you were going to use that, apply that argument to mountain lions, and you would say that the melanistic mountain lions might be more likely to appear in the areas with denser forest, and not necessarily the mountain lions that live in wide open, Great
right.
Plains.
So pretty much like the California mountains, Sierra Nevadas.
Sure.
Yeah, because that's a fairly denser forested area throughout that whole mountain range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm a transplant, so I'm a transplant to Wisconsin from California. So it used to be my old stomping grounds out there.
Oh, okay, cool.
So, I guess what also there's something else that was kind of that I was thinking about too, and this could go along the lines of Nessie. How about the reports? I can't remember exactly which year frames this was, but the reports of the possibility of like pigmented or like pygmy, smaller creatures of like the source or brachiosaurus in the Amazon. I've heard, or I read an article about that they claim that there's a tribe that claims that there is a smaller version of a brachiosaur or brontosaurus down there that they have seen many a time, but nobody's ever caught any video or anything of it.
I'm sorry, and are you talking about Africa or the Amazon?
The Amazon.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there have been legends or tall tales, I should say, of living dinosaurs coming out of Mesoamerica, South America, the Amazon, and Central America, and even Chiapas in Mexico for a long time. But the strongest argument to be made for that would be in the Congo in Africa, where you have something called the Mokele Mbembe or Nyamala, which is basically described as being just like what you're saying, a small sauropod, like a patasaurus type of dinosaur with the long neck, small head, huge body, big powerful tail. And I know people, I've never gone to search for that, but I know I have colleagues that have gone over there and looked for the Mokele Mbembe. I've heard some of the stories about South America, but we also have to delineate that perhaps from the other traditional lake monsters like Nessie, Ogopogo, Champ, some of those other you guys got a bunch of lake monsters up in Wisconsin. So a lot of those are very similar descriptions, but they don't fit. I don't think the Apatosaurus or dinosaur type of mold, but maybe something else.
Not even plesiosaurs?
No, I'm not a. Well, I mean, they could be. But it's unlikely. I'm not an advocate of the plesiosaur theory either, because, and I write about this in my book, The Essential Guide to the Loch Ness Monster. The vast amount of physical sightings of Nessie and other lake monsters don't describe something that looks like a plesiosaur. The sightings of a head and a neck are very rare. It's only about 15% of the time that people actually see anything like a head or a neck. 85% of the time, it's just big humps, big
Yeah,
smooth
puppies,
humps
big humps,
that
like
that
big
undulate
humps.
through the water up and down like this. And
Very rarely have they seen a head.
many people have described the skin as whale-like, which is interesting. So that's kind of a teaser for my book, which if people want to check out a theory, it's not my theory, it's one that's been out for years, but these lake monsters might in fact be mammals, prehistoric still, something prehistoric. There were large aquatic mammals in, you know,
Yeah.
millions of years ago that
Well,
were.
yeah. I mean, like you said earlier, our planet it is so weird because mankind and science knows more about what's out there towards the moon and in the solar system than what they know what's in our oceans and our forested areas that are unexplored. We have put more attention towards space exploration than our own planet. So it's like only I think it's like only 20% of our water or our oceans have been actually explored.
Yeah,
So
it's true.
what else can be there? You know?
Theories. It's all theories yet.
I interviewed a guy a couple of years ago who discovered a new species of whale in 2017.
Uh-oh.
It was washed up dead on a beach, but no one had ever seen one of these. It's a small whale. It's about 14, 18 feet long. But to
See,
your point there, Mark, new species of whales are still being discovered. So that says something.
well, that's
Right.
why I was saying, like when they, some of this stuff doesn't get seen too easily sometimes, and we have one. We actually went looking for one of just out of because we had time and we were close by, so we decided to check out the area. And I kind of grew up there, so I knew the spot. It was at Picnic Point, which is like near Lake Mendota, and the thing's called Bozo. What
Yep,
you
I've
see
heard of
in Lake
that.
Mendota. I have a
Bozo with an
theory.
H, Bozho. I'm sorry. Go
Right,
ahead.
right,
Mhm.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So we went out there looking for that, and I got a theory about what people because of I used to get taken fishing there a lot when I was a kid in that area, and I just believe it's just some overgrown lake sturgeon that
Yeah.
people are seeing. Um, because Mendota is like the biggest lake in the Madison area and the deepest, and it's prime area for that. And you may not see them as often,
Yeah.
or might
Yeah.
not be in the right spot to see these fish, and not know what it is if you don't know, your fish very well. You may not know what one is.
Yeah, they're weird.
Well,
They're very
Yeah,
prehistoric looking fish with the bony
right,
ridges and the.
yep, very much
exactly.
so.
Yeah. Yeah, they're
You
weird.
see one of those break the surface, you might think sea monster right away. You
Yeah, I
know,
think the record for the eastern sturgeon, and they still get pretty big, but I think the biggest documented sturgeon in the Great Lakes area was about 7 feet long, which is still pretty big. And a lot of people, if they saw that, would freak out because
Mhm.
that 7 foot fish is pretty huge when you're up close to it.
right?
But in the western U.S., that species Asapenser transmontanus, they can get up to be 11 feet long. And there's a species in Russia, it's endangered, but the Russian beluga caviar, beluga sturgeon, are like, there was one that was like 24 feet long that was caught in a river. I mean, this was like
Oh,
a long time ago, but still, that's a huge friggin' fish to be swimming into a river or a lake.
mhm.
And that would, I'm to your point, Joe. I think that would explain a lot of lake monster reports in some places.
Well, I think that's what explains the one in Mendota, at
Mhm.
least. You know, I mean, I'm not a fisherman anymore, but I would bet that you could catch a good sized one out of there, and if you never saw one before, that's the first thing you'd think. I mean,
Yeah.
we used to Monona, Lake Mendota, Monona, and Monona Bay. You could sit out there and watch the carp fly up out of the water all day long and be amazed at the size of some of those suckers that flew out of that water, you know. And yeah, there had to have been plenty of food to make those things big enough,
Mm.
you know. So Yeah, an oversized sturgeon in Lake Mendota, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Reasonable
Well,
theory.
again, too. We'll go back to. I'll swing us back into the Nessie because you did mention that earlier about getting to go over there with your dad. Um, how for the size of the creature that they're calling Nessie or saying that they see in Loch Ness, how much food source is there in there? Is there enough to sustain something that size?
That's a great question. I like the way you're thinking now. Because this is what excites me about cryptozoology is the zoology part. Answering these questions. Okay. So Loch Ness is a nutrient poor lake. It's called an oligotrophic lake. So there are not a lot of building blocks like plankton and algae. Thus, there are not a lot of little fish or not even that many big fish. They estimate like only 20 tons in the whole lake of fish. But it depends on what you think Nessie is eating. So if Nessie is eating fish, then yeah, it could be a little problematic. Although there are some seasonal salmon runs into Loch Ness. It is connected to the ocean, and there are some seasonal salmon runs that kind of enrich the lake a little bit. But there's a lot of other things to eat in Loch Ness. If, for example, an animal was a detritivore, which is an animal that eats vegetation that's falling down to the bottom of a lake or a pond or something, because there's a lot of that in Loch Ness. There are a lot of peat and trees and vegetation that get washed into the lake and sink to the bottom. And it's a pretty deep lake. So, maybe we need to rethink our theory on what Nessie could be. And that's, again, another reason to argue against a plesiosaur, because a plesiosaur would be a strict carnivore. It would be constantly fishing. Local fishermen might notice changes in the fish population. Who knows? But if there was something that was living towards the bottom of Loch Ness, which is about 754 feet verified in some spots, there's a lot of that stuff on the bottom, imagine like a giant catfish or Plecostomus. Some people, there's one theory that it could be a mollusk, that Nessie could be like this massive snail that's like 20 feet long that lives in the. I mean, it's not impossible, so.
I wouldn't say it would be.
An amphibian too, an amphibian today. So I mean, there's lots of different theories. We don't really know, but you're right. You got to ask those questions, like what does it eat?
Oh heck yeah, you got to ask those questions.
That's the only way it becomes.
And also, if you look at the way they are with this too, I mean, you get all these species that have been documented and said are extinct, but are they truly extinct? Because the coelacanth, they thought that was extinct until it was caught off the coast of Japan, and that was about 20 years ago, I believe.
No, actually, yeah, it's a great point. But the coelacanth was Latimeria columna is the Latin name. Was first captured off the coast of South Africa in 1938, and so actually,
I have it wrong.
December. It's okay. It's the point that you're making is a valid one, which is that is a species of an ancient type of lobe-finned fish that scientists thought had died out with the dinosaurs. It was a dinosaur fish, And then you're right. They finally caught one, or they caught one in 1938 off South Africa, and subsequently they have found a population mark close to Japan, but it's actually off the coast of Indonesia. There have been a second coelacanth species was discovered in the 90s. And there might even be some in the Gulf of Mexico. There have been coelacanth-like scales that have been found in Florida out of the water. So, but you're right. That's called a Lazarus taxon, and that's when an animal is declared extinct by science, and then suddenly it pops up and it's not extinct.
That scares the hell out of me. That's why you'll never catch me on the ocean. I'm afraid that the megalodon's still around. Somewhere. Just
I knew he was going to bring that in. But no, the Sea of Cortez, that area of the ocean that's between Mexico and Baja California, that's really a fairly deep section of ocean. And I know that there are some from what I remember seeing in documentary, there's some very aggressive type squid that's in that area.
Oh yeah, Yeah, the Humboldt squid. Yeah, those are aggressive, and there have been giant squids found all over the world. Big
Architeuthis.
Architeuthis, very good. Mhm.
Yeah, I know. I'm name dropping. I have an encyclopedia up here that turns pages every now and then.
It's good
a lot
knowledge
of
to
times,
have.
a lot of times it's frivolous, but it happens.
No, it's good knowledge to have for sure. Yeah, megalodon is not one that I advocate really. I mean, this puts your mind at ease, Joe. And I won't. I'm not a big swimmer either. I don't like to go into.
I love to swim.
I don't like to introduce myself into the food chain. That's one of my main philosophies. But megalodon, what we know about megalodon, and it's all speculation based on fossil teeth and jaws.
Hmm.
Megalodon probably was a pelagic swimmer, so it was probably fairly close to the surface. So the only way Megalodon would have survived beyond its presumed extinction date would be as if it had evolved maybe to a deeper ocean shark, which I guess isn't totally impossible, but it would be eating the giant squids that we were just talking about. That would be the food source probably. But there aren't a lot of um, as far as my research goes, there haven't been a lot of really convincing modern sightings of sharks bigger
Right.
than
Oh,
standard big great whites.
called torpedo or something like that.
But
The
it's
one,
fun.
the
It's
one
fun to look.
female,
Wait,
that one female great white.
yeah, they were
That I
tracking
think they
it.
tagged her. They
Yeah, they
tagged
tagged.
her off of Australia. So
Yeah. There's one off the coast of Mexico called Big Blue, and she was been seen again near Hawaii or something. So they
oh
travel.
wow.
There are some big ones out there, and they definitely travel. But 22 feet, I think, is probably that's almost as big as the shark in Jaws. So that's pretty impressive.
There's a clip.
Yeah, 8 years old, and my cousin takes me to see that movie.
That was a classic.
Yeah, well, that one scared the living crap out of me. I never I never wanted to go near water after that.
I think piranha kept me out of the water for a while. Yeah,
Yeah, that was a good one. I like Piranha too. The original Roger Corman
the
version.
original, yeah, from the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one kept
So
me out of water except for the pool.
Those have been caught in lakes, though. Not to scare you, Joe, but
oh no, no, no.
but there have some southern states. People have introduced invasive piranhas into some state.
Yes,
They've been caught.
I got one for you then, Ken. Here in
Okay.
Wisconsin, in Columbia County, up north of where I'm at right here, there's this a power plant, a coal-fired power plant, and they pull the water out of the Wisconsin River for doing for the turbines, and then they dump it into their holding lake that they call Lake Columbia. There was an 8-year-old kid caught a 20-pound piranha out of that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was in one of our newspapers.
Wow. Well, yeah, that just shows
So
you things
Somebody
crazy.
must have had it as a pet at one time and thrown it in somewhere.
Yeah.
so yeah.
Because
What
some
happened?
of these pet stores around, I know around the Madison area, used to sell them as pets. They weren't big; they were just little tiny things.
Right. That's funny though.
So so okay, now ding it. Let's get back on the cryptids. Stop getting us off track, Joe. Now, down in Florida, now when we get towards Bigfoot again, skunk ape.
Mhm.
That's, I mean, people claim that one actually exists in the Everglades and part of the like the bayou and stuff like that over in Orleans and stuff.
Mhm.
What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, if we accept the evidence that there is a giant hominin, relic hominin, perhaps a great ape that walks on its hind legs most of the time, that lives in the Pacific Northwest, and there are a lot of sightings and footprints that have been found in the southeastern U.S. as well. So you have a lot of habitat there. I grew up in not quite Florida, but I grew up about an hour south of Houston, on very close to the Gulf Coast, and it was basically a very swampy habitat. And it's the same type of, like, you got these bottoms and kind of low saturated swamps and things that extend all the way from East Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. And that area is all pretty much contiguous to Florida. So there's a lot of habitat there, very wet, a lot of resources. And yes, the sightings of the skunk apes. There are, of course, other names. Skunk ape is a local Florida moniker for a Bigfoot type creature, but there are other names. In Alabama, they're called the boogers. Sometimes they're known as wild men. Those are usually older stories. Swamp apes. So those stories are pervasive, and certainly I've done research.
I know I can't pronounce it correct. I know I can't pronounce it correctly, but the down in the bayou they call them the Rougarou or something like that.
Rougarou?
Yeah, Rougarou.
Yeah, that could be. That's kind of a Louisiana French Cajun name for a werewolf type creature, but it could also apply to a Bigfoot if it's a big hairy man-like monster running around in the swamp there. I've done research in Florida searching for the skunk ape, primarily in the green swamp. I've done research in southeast Texas in also the Honey Island swamp monster north of New Orleans in the Pearl River Basin. So I've done a lot of research in those areas, and what I can say is that they're very difficult to get into some of those spots. There's a lot of things to eat for a large, hominin or animal, an omnivore. And the footprints are generally, I'd say for the most part, they're fairly consistent with the Bigfoot, Sasquatch prints that we find in the Pacific Northwest. There's a couple of interesting things about the southern Bigfoot or the skunk ape. There are more stories of them being hyper aggressive. In other words, like more aggressive towards people, which could be explained by the fact that they have less habitat and they're more territorial, or they're inbreeding. That's a theory. Is that I know this is kind of a Deliverance. You hear the Deliverance music in the background, but if there is not, if the gene, there could be genetic bottlenecks if there are less Bigfoots. You know what I'm saying?
It's true. Yeah.
And the footprints are fairly consistent, although sometimes you have those weird 3- and 4-toed footprints that are found in the South. And there's also actually more accounts of them going down on all fours. I've interviewed many people that have seen these swamp apes or skunk apes and say that they run on 2 legs, but sometimes they go down on 4 legs. You don't hear that much in the Pacific Northwest in terms of the traditional Bigfoot or Sasquatch. It seems to be more of an Eastern Bigfoot thing. So
what do you think of the theory that the Gigantopithecus might still be a feasible type of instead of being a full cryptid, being like still in existence?
Well, I mean, honestly, Mark, the Gigantopithecus model has kind of changed in recent years, and I know a lot of Bigfoot researchers are now kind of going in a different direction. Because even though we know Gigantopithecus, which was a giant ape that lived during the Pleistocene in Asia, it was a huge ape, but it doesn't really, based on what they're now thinking, based on the vegetation, the fossilized vegetation they've found in the teeth and stuff, they think it was really more like a big orangutan. Probably too big to go up in trees because it was probably 10 feet tall and weighed, 1,000, 2,000 pounds, but it was probably like a big orangutan that just like a terrestrial ape, a quadruped. Really an interesting candidate for Bigfoot, talking about other prehistoric hominins, is something called Paranthropus boisei, which was an African hominin that looked exactly like Bigfoot. It was just a little smaller. East and South Africa. It walked on 2 legs. It had very primitive features in terms of a receding cranial
Wow.
set up, and sagittal crest, big teeth, um, very muscular. So it was, but it was only about 5.5 feet tall, so it was kind of short. So, but if you would consider that that was a million years ago, if this
Yeah.
thing evolved over a million years and just gotten bigger, it would look exactly like Bigfoot, exactly what people are describing, and it would behave pretty much like Bigfoot.
Interesting.
You have
They have
about the
to
same
adapt.
level of intelligence, no real, very primitive tool use, if any, and it would be an omnivore, so it would be eating all the things that Bigfoot eats. So that's kind of a theory that, like, myself, Dr. Jeff Meldrum, Cliff Barrickman, Lauren Coleman, a lot of Bigfoot researchers lately have been talking about Paranthropus as a Bigfoot candidate. And Gigantopithecus is becoming less likely to be a candidate.
That's kind of interesting.
Look into that one.
Definitely have to look into that one.
Well, if it gets bigger, let's say it evolves and it gets bigger, so if it gets bigger, it gets stronger then too, right? That that would make sense.
Yeah,
So that would
more mass.
explain why it can, maybe knock down a tree or two in the right place, especially if the growth in the tree's been rotting anyways. Something that strong and that heavy could easily push on it enough to get it knocked over or throw the big rock that you
Yeah.
or I couldn't throw
Oh,
if
yeah.
it's
Yeah,
thrown at people, all those different stories we hear.
Yeah. It would be incredibly powerful, no doubt.
definitely. So I know that there's been like an uptick in the sightings of them. Any theories on that?
Sightings of Bigfoot?
Yeah.
I think
Especially
if
around
there's,
here.
I mean, I would think if there was an uptick in sightings recently, it would be because people are feeling more comfortable about reporting their sightings. Because back in the day, people would often, if they saw these things, they would keep it to themselves. They didn't want to get locked up. They would, there's jokes about the guys with the butterfly nets that would come for you. So a lot of these, I've
Wait,
encountered this a lot through the years where people have come up to me and said, my uncle saw a Bigfoot hunting one time, and we always talked about it in the family, but we never told anyone outside the family,
right.
or those kinds of stories. So now that Bigfoot is becoming more acceptable, in terms of an interest in Bigfoot because of TV shows like Finding Bigfoot, Monster
Mhm.
Quest, Expedition Bigfoot, all that stuff. All the podcasts like yours and others that talk about it. And so I think that would be the thing, is that maybe there are more Bigfoot researchers because of the TV shows and the popularity of the subject. So more
Right.
researchers means more reports are being collected and documented. So I think that would be my take on it. And also I think maybe there is a second causation, which would be loss of habitat. And I know that's kind of a serious tone to take, but it's just a true thing that there's a lot of deforestation going on in
Well, that's
North
for all
America,
Oh yeah.
and that would mean
Yeah.
more sightings, right? And also, weather, cataclysmic weather events, all the crazy things that are going on,
Well,
forest fires, and
I was just gonna say the forest fires that happen in California all the time.
yeah,
That destroys their habitat, and that would push them
yeah,
to either come out into
all
the open,
wildlife.
or try to find a different habitat.
agreed.
You know, and then also, like you said, the deforestation that's been going on too. That's a very unfortunate thing with the way humans have been. I mean, we're supposed to be the care of this planet, and we're doing nothing but basically destroying it.
See, it's gonna be one of these days you're gonna live
Agreed.
just in the right area. You're gonna wake up and you're gonna see a wolf in your backyard at the rate. Yeah, they're getting
But yeah,
everything's getting seen further south than it used to here in Wisconsin.
Yeah,
Black bears, mountain lions, the wolves, you know, all of that. It's because they're building up further north and taking down the forest and then building new communities and new shopping centers and whatever. Look
yeah,
how the kettle moraine forest is spread out throughout the whole state. And
the,
it's split up because you got all those roads going through it now.
mm,
yep, I know. But So, Ken, anything new coming up for you that you want to talk about?
I currently can be seen on a TV series called The Proof is Out There, which airs on History Channel on Friday nights, I think 9 p.m. Central. If I'm not mistaken, it's possibly right after Ancient Aliens, and sometimes they mix in a show called Unexplained with William Shatner. I've also been on a couple of those episodes,
Okay. Yeah.
so people can check me out there. Um, I'm working on, I don't have any public appearances until next year. Usually I can be seen at different conferences and paranormal and Bigfoot cryptid events around North America.
Right.
So right now I'm just kind of working on some research and writing and, putting possibly a book together or some articles and things like that. Like a lot of people, the holidays is kind of the time when things slow down for me and I just kind of recalibrate and start making plans for the next year. But people can certainly check me out on my website, kengerhard.com. I'm on social media. I have a YouTube channel and the History Channel. Like I said, I'm usually on there on a Friday night, here and there.
Cool. Yeah, I've seen a couple episodes of The Truth Is Out There. He actually did a thing on it on Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good show. They do a lot of. In fact, they did a special called "The Legend of Bigfoot." It was a Proof Is Out There kind of episode where they did a kind of a new enhancement of the Patterson Gimlin film that was interesting, that revealed some new details. So, yeah, I like the show. I mean, if it's a hoax, if they think it's a hoax, they'll call it a hoax. If they can't decide, they'll say we can't. We don't know what this is, or they'll say maybe it is unexplained something. So, I think the show
Yeah,
does a job of trying to be pretty objective about the videos that are shown.
you just did it though by mentioning the Patterson film. I don't think that's a hoax, and it's hard to actually say it is because when you're looking at it and you're watching it, that would be one hell of a hoax because you can see the muscle movement under the hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the year back in the '60s when that was filmed, that was we've used this as an example. That was when Hollywood was making the Planet of the Apes movies. Now, if they had that kind of technology to make that kind of hoax, why were they not using it in that movie or in a movie like that
Yeah, that was
to
pretty. I mean, those
have the
apes were pretty
costumes
big
that great?
back
Agreed.
then, those Planet of the
I
Apes.
mean, the only way I could see anybody hoaxing that is to convince a woman who is like 7 foot tall to glue all this hair all over her body and walk through there naked like that. So you could literally see the muscle movement. That's my thought on it, man.
No arguments here, but I got to show you something since you brought it up. This is right here in front of me. This is my Bigfoot nerd moment. I've got a bunch of these, but this is a piece of wood that is seen in the Patterson Gimlin film. It's a piece of
Awesome.
the big tree that in the front of the film, there's like a down tree, and this is a piece of that down tree. So I got to visit the film site a couple years ago, and it was
That'd
pretty
be
cool. But yeah, I'm with you, man. I think it's authentic. All the arguments you made, for all the reasons you said. So
yeah, I mean it. I'm sorry, but I mean this was filmed back in the '60s,
mm-hmm.
and
it was pretty hard with that technology.
I don't
It was
know.
pretty hard to do it.
I'm watching this thing. I watched it over and over again, at least 4 or 5 different times, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, you can literally see the muscle movement underneath the hair.
Well, in
Now,
the film cameras, you couldn't edit on site. You couldn't edit those films on site on the camera, using the camera. Today, with the digital cameras we have, you can edit in little details, take out lighting, do all kinds of little things, do the night vision
yeah,
stuff,
that's
right
why.
there.
Yeah, that's why the newer films and the newer digital that we have, I can't trust those as well because they're too easy to manipulate.
sometimes. But there's a lot of real stuff out there that's unexplained that you just can't explain, and I'm gonna try to find some of the answers. Yeah.
Well, Ken, anything else? We're coming up on our hour.
Yep.
I see somebody asked a question in the chat room here. Should I
Oh,
answer that?
yeah.
Hey, go ahead. Here's
Go ahead, answer it if you want.
Okay, this is a great question. Do you think there's a cryptid above others that is discovered would have more impact on the environment? It does make sense. I would say that if we discovered or proved that Bigfoot or Sasquatch actually existed in North America, because it looks so human-like, I think that you would be able to make an argument to legislation and stuff to protect more habitat for it. So I think, as opposed to like if we found like black panthers, it would still be cool. But if it was something like Bigfoot were found, even though it's not human per se, I think you could get that movement going to say, you know what, these creatures, they may be sentient. They're so much like us and how they look. They walk, let's protect land for them in the Pacific Northwest or wherever their habitat. So I think that would be the biggest impact. It would be a positive impact on the environment because we'd have more forested lands protected, perhaps.
Exactly.
So. Right. And
no, I agree with you on
the
that.
state already do something like put it on like a endangered species list or something, so that it makes it illegal to hunt them?
Yeah, again, that would have to happen.
The state that actually
no, there's a state out there. I can't remember which one it was. They actually did do that.
It's a Skamania, it's a county, Skamania County, Washington. Actually, two counties in Washington State and the city of Whitehall, New York. And all of those places, it is illegal to shoot or harass or harm a Bigfoot.
I don't think I want to shoot it. I just want a good picture. One that's not.
That's the only kind of shooting you want to do is a snapshot.
Right.
Get him to pose with me, yeah, and then take a snapshot.
That would be awesome. The ultimate selfie.
Oh, heck yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for having me on, and I appreciate everyone that listened in. This was fun.
Thank you very much for coming
on. Good discussion.
Well, we do have people listening
for a long time.
We do have people listening when we go live, but a lot of people also view our stuff afterwards. So
very cool.
On YouTube and Facebook.
Cool. Well, all my books are available on Amazon. So if anyone wants to read a little bit more about my research into Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster,
plug yourself, man.
Any of these Thunderbirds, check out my books on Amazon.com, and I appreciate your support.
Well, thanks, Ken.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night. Be safe.